Hello, I'm Hussam from Tunisia. Welcome to Close Up on C-SPAN at the National Orchestra. Today we're going to talk about democracy in the Muslim world.
And the guests who will be speaking today are His Excellency Said Jawad, Ambassador of Afghanistan to the United States of America. Ziad Asali, President and founder of the American Task Force on Palestine. Ali Al-Ahmed, Director of the Institute for Gulf Affairs. And our host, John Milewski.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you give a round of applause for your colleagues who just did those introductions and did a great job of doing it. Thanks. Before we dive into our subject matter, let me share with you a little more details about the group of young people who are with us today. An extraordinary group of young people, and you'll get to meet some of them as they ask their questions and make their comments throughout the program. They're part of a program called YES, Youth Exchange and Study, that was established in 2002. It's run under the auspices of the Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and it provides scholarships for secondary school students from countries with significant Muslim populations, and they get to spend a year on an exchange, an academic exchange here in the United States. And this is the end of the road for them. This Washington component, conducted by the Close-Up Foundation, is the grand finale, and they'll all be heading home to their countries. I wanted to also mention one of our partners in this program, that is IUSA, a leading nonprofit organization promoting global learning and leadership through its exchange programs. And IUSA and the IUSA Consortium are responsible for working with these young people and identifying the homes that will play host to them while they stay here in the United States. So that gives you a little setup of what we're going to be talking about. And without further ado, we're going to turn to our student questions and see what is on our young people's minds. And ma'am, you're first. Go ahead, please. Hi.
Hi, my name is Miriam Labidi. I'm from Tunisia. It's nice to be here today. Well, Tunisia and Sudan are in the same continent, so I'm really concerned about all the things going on there. And we know the horrible things that are happening to the Sudanian people. I was just wondering, how do you see the future of the Sudanian people, and are they able to reach a stable situation again?
Thank you very much for this question. It's very, before I go, do you know American Idol?
Yes.
So they had my name wrong. My name is Taylor Hicks.
Got rid of the gray hair.
So, yes, I forgot it, the cover. Anyway, it's very exciting to see young people like yourself interested in politics and understanding what happens in their community. And this is a very promising sign. On your question, the problem of Sudan and in the region, really it is about people representation in their government. Sudan is formed from different ethnic and religious groups. There are Arabs, there are Africans, and there are Muslims, and there are non-Muslims. There are people who are Christians and African religions. So without a structure, without a government that allows every section of that society, of these societies, that respects the religions and languages of these communities, Sudan will not have a stable future. And that model should be applied to all the countries in the region. Without that, it's not going to be stable.
Yes, I think that's a very problematic area. I have personally a great interest in Sudan. I visited Sudan in the year 2004 because I think if Sudan can be put together, you would have put together a great variety of peoples, black and white, Arabs and non-Arabs, Muslims and non-Muslims, and many tribal affiliations. It would be a country with only 35 million people, that is 1/3 the size of the United States. So there's a great potential for improvement out there. Unfortunately, history and political legacy has worked against the people of Sudan, and it is the challenge for the Sudanese people to find a way to put together a government that has, at the end of the day, a specific and clear respect for the individual rights and rule of law. Because tribal and religious and racial affiliations will always hamper this progress. And I think in many ways the international community has to find a very clear role to play, because internally it is very hard to visualize a way out if the Sudanese are left on their own devices.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to let you know that although we're having a good time here and this is a safe environment, that there are harsh realities out there. And because of that, the Iraqi students who join us today are not going to be asking their questions on camera for security concerns back home. So I have here a list of questions from our students from Iraq, and I'm going to ask gentlemen for you to comment. And this one is a good chance for all of you to weigh in a general way. And the students would like to know just your update on the goal of democracy in the Middle East and how far along the path to democracy we are in accomplishing that goal, or even if that's where it's headed. This is the question. Mr. Ambassador, we'll start with you.
This is a very good question, and I would love to actually see the students, because we have a similar situation in Afghanistan. The process of building a democratic system in Afghanistan in the past 4 years has been very successfully completed. And if democracy means to have security, an opportunity to speak freely, and have an opportunity to use your potential fully, this is what every human being demands and deserves. So that's why the prospect of democracy in the Islamic societies and Islamic countries is great, provided that some of the impediment, which most of them are political and due to the political regime imposed on these societies, are removed. Afghanistan is a prime example, a conservative Muslim society with relatively small middle class. When they've given a chance, 86% of the eligible voters participated in the elections. A significant number of the women are running for offices. 27% of the members of the parliament are women. Women are returning back to the jobs, teaching, and then working for the government. A significant number of students going back to school are girls. So if human beings are giving an opportunity anywhere in the world, they will take it and they will make the best out of it. The prospect, I hope that will be the same, and I'm sure that will be similar for Iraq when the security situation is further improved.
I clearly agree with all of you that the best thing that can happen possibly to any society is to have the rules of law and individual rights applauded and upheld by every society. Unfortunately, this is not what's happening in large parts of the world. And I have great concern about the simplification of the concept of democracy, the two-dimensional definition of the concept of democracy, i.e. elections mean democracy. We have witnessed, of course, recent elections in several parts of the Arab Islamic world that have been contentious and have not yielded exactly the kind of results that will lead to stability. So knowing the context of the Arab Islamic world, these 55 different Islamic countries and 22 different Arab countries have different political systems. Generalizations about them is no more true than if you say there is such a thing as a Christian way of governance that would include the Philippines and South America and Northern Europe and the United States. So we have to be specific, and we have to aim at improving governance in each and every country. I think part of the struggle that we see today about the challenge to the existing nation-state system by the new Islamic forces is similar to the Arab nationalism that was in vogue 20, 30, 40 years ago, is destabilizing of each and every Arab state. So you have to take those single states and try and improve the governance. And this can only be done locally with forces that would acknowledge pluralism, participation of as large a number of people, and stabilizing the economy. This is not going to be a one prescription fit all sort of thing, and this requires a lot of work. Unfortunately, the dialogue and the simplification that we are subjected to makes the very word democracy a subject of contempt across the Arab Islamic world, which is a major loss, because the only way out is a true definition of democracy that would have to be a combination of internal and external forces have to cooperate in order to bring it about.
The democracy in the region will take time. No doubt about it. Remember, it took 50 years for the Eastern European countries to move forward, and it's still struggling in some areas. But I think as Muslims, and in Muslim countries or Muslim-dominated countries, there is a lot of hope, especially young people like yourself. You come from different parts of that world. You look different. You speak different languages. You come from different ethnic groups. The key to democracy is not going to be, we're not going to have democracy like in the US. We have our own democracy. We wear different clothes. We use different perfumes. We eat different food. So we can use a little bit slightly different form of government. As long as, number one, you have protection of the individual. Every individual has his freedom, religious freedom, intellectual freedom, academic freedom, all kind of personal freedoms. At the same time, the protection of groups. We have problems in an old society. We are somewhat old societies. There are tribes, there are sects, there are ethnic groups. All of these groups must be protected and respected equally in order to achieve there. We have to participate. Imagine yourself in a house with your brother who looks different than you, or your sister who has long hair or short hair, or who likes music, you don't like music. In order, if your parents die, you have to share in the house, you equally. And this is exactly like what you have in a country, where all the children in a big house with equal rights. No one has more rights than the other. And we need to get there by continuously pushing and asking peacefully. I think one of the problems is anytime when there is an attempt to move to democracy, people resort to violence. And I think we need to send that message that no matter how much differences we have, we should not resort to violence against each other. And this is the struggle in all these countries, in Algeria and Iraq, and now in the Palestinian territories. The minute we have differences, we resort to the bomb or to the gun. We need to resort to debating and speaking against each other and with each other, so we can reach a goal. Without democracy allows us to speak our minds, but in peaceful manners, and that is what we should do.
In the interest of not just talking about democracy, but practicing it, we asked the Iraqi students to vote on the questions that they wanted to ask from those submitted. And it was a close vote, so I'm going to ask you, we'll take some license here because you don't get to appear on camera, and we'll ask the second question, the one that came in second. And it's a speculation question, gentlemen, and the students were wondering if you had any idea of how the Iraqi people would react if the U.S. troops, if or when the U.S. troops are withdrawn from their country. Any thoughts on this?
Well, one of the tragedies of Iraq is that its history is very complicated, and the people are actually divided. It has been ruled by essentially one man for a very long period of history. And now this is the first time where the previous order has disintegrated, and people have a chance to actually have a participation. And when they do have a participation, you can see that this will reflect their genuine differences. It's more than just the Shiites, Sunnis, Kurds, etc., etc. That's one fault line that's been present for some time, but now has a chance of being expressed. And unfortunately, it will be expressed violently because there is no tradition of self-restraint and abiding with the rules of the game. So I think if the troops are withdrawn from Iraq, there will be more bloodletting and more conflict, and this will bring the country closer to a civil war. I think the government or those who are affiliated with the present political establishment have a great deal of fear and trepidation about just the departure of the United States forces, and it seems to me that is well justified. On the other hand, those who are opposed to the presence of the troops will never sit still till these troops leave. So either way, you will have, unfortunately, a continuation of strife.
If I may, I actually have very close relationship with Iraq because I used to spend my childhood there. I did travel across Iraq when I was a child. I love the Iraqi food, and I still, if you invite me to an Iraqi food, I will go any day. And I have most of my friends now in Iraqis too, so I know that country very well from the fact that I trust the people of Iraq, and that is what we have to do. The Americans and the international, we have to trust the people of Iraq. This is a country that produces that actually brought Islam to its civil status. You know, in Medina and Mecca there was no books, and it was done in Basra and in Baghdad, and Iraq brought Islam to that level. Iraq was the launching pad of Islamic civilization. It was not done in Mecca and Medina, like I said. So there is a possibility for a good outcome. The problem is the neighboring countries. Those neighboring countries are mostly ruled by dictators who were never elected. They have an interest in undermining that experiment, that attempt to move and civilize the political system. And that's why you see, I'm from Saudi Arabia, so you see 3,000 Saudi suicide bombers and terrorists going to Iraq. They don't go anywhere, they go to Iraq. And because the government of that country is encouraging this. And similarly, the Jordanians and other governments are doing the same. So this is the problem. The Iraqi people are trying. That's why they went and voted in huge numbers. Everyone, the Shia, the Sunnis, the Kurds, the international community and the neighboring countries and the people too. I think sometimes the people of the regions are misled by their governments and by certain satellite stations that they should fight what's happening in Iraq. What's happening in Iraq is good not only for the Iraqi people, but also for the Jordanian and Saudi and Syrians and Egyptian and everybody. This is an attempt to give back the ownership of that country to the people, to you and me. And that's what we have to work on. I think the Americans should stay there for a substantial amount of time in order to help build that country as economic and governance. But also they have to change their mission from occupation to reconstruction and enabling the people of Iraq to stand on their own feet.
Okay. Thanks, and I want to thank our Iraqi students for your questions and hope that I represented them well for you. Hi, go ahead, please.
Hey, I'm Mohammed from Syria. I just want to ask, do you see any possibilities to reach peace in the Middle East in the near future, considering the situation in Iraq, the situation in Palestine, and the bad relationships that the U.S. has with major governments in the Middle East, such as Syria and other governments?
Could you share with us your hopes for peace in the region? Are you concerned that you're growing up in a world that will have violent conflict for a long time, or are you hopeful?
Yeah, I am hopeful, but I don't know, considering these situations and these relationships, I don't know if the peace in the Middle East is reachable in the seeable future. I mean, the U.S. government is looking for peace, but we don't know if we're gonna reach it if the U.S. has still doing the double standard policies, looking for Middle East and trying to force democracy, while on the other hand forcing sanctions and economic restrictions and other restrictions on the governments in the region.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Ambassador. Can we get you to begin on this question of hopes for peace?
Certainly there is hopes of peace. I can specifically talk about the situation in my country. Afghanistan is a prime example where there's a strong consensus of the international community on helping rebuild Afghanistan, on assisting the Afghan people. The important part of this process is to enable the people of Afghanistan or the people of any country to have a voice. As I mentioned, the problem for the peace process in a lot of these countries has political nature and has to do with the nature of some of the regime being in there, that will truly not allow a full participation of the citizen in the process. In case of Afghanistan, as I mentioned, people are demanding the partnership, the participation of the international community. Their only hope is to strengthen peace in Afghanistan and rebuild Afghanistan through cooperation with the international community. And I would rather have other experts from the Middle East to speak about the region, because Afghanistan's situation is different from that of Palestine or some other crisis in the region.
Well, the prospects for immediate peace are very abysmal, and I don't think that anybody should have any immediate expectations of things being resolved quickly. There are structural problems in the Middle East, governance problems, and dictatorship problems, and educational problems, unemployment problems, economic problems. Nothing will solve all these quickly. There is the added problem of Palestine, the problem of occupation, that has been a major destabilizing factor in poisoning the atmosphere across the board. And it has been used as an explanation and an excuse to continue the absence of democracy that plagued a large part of the Middle East. So the way out cannot be just internal forces in the Middle East. The Arabs, the Muslims, etc., have problems of their own, but there has been this relation with the West and the rest of the world that had added to the problems of the area. This cannot be ignored, and it also could be a means, a tool for improving. There are choices to be made here. The United States has now taken a very unusual position the last few years of actually making democracy as an objective, a serious objective, which means, in many ways, destabilizing many of the Arab regimes, although this is not discussed very openly. That's what it is. When you ask the people to change the way they govern, then that will limit their authority. There will be a lot of resistance to that. Now, with the war in Iraq, with the lack of progress in Palestine, and with the emerging power of Iran now, which has Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon, and which has control over Hamas, it has emerged as a rather regional superpower that the United States has to contend with when it deals with nuclear issues. So the region cannot solve its problems alone, and the rest of the world is an active participant, the United States primarily, and of course Europe, but the people have to be active participants themselves. They have to know that it is their own destiny that's at stake, and they have to be more assertive. It is disappointing that the success of the regimes for so many decades has been so total that you see very little in the way of a public life. I think there is no substitute to the people actually trying to move forward. We've seen a very good move on that in Lebanon a few years ago, both ways, and I think that should be encouraged.
I think the prospect for peace is not only, you're from Syria, and I've been to Syria many times, and some people, especially from the Levant, try to, I think, always view it, what happens in their region is the measure. There is not only a Palestinian issue. There is also a Syrian issue. There is an Egyptian issue. There are 6 million Egyptians who are homeless. That's twice the number of Palestinians. 6 million Egyptians who don't have homes. That's a problem that nobody talks about. So the reason I said that is there is not only one problem. There are many problems, like the doctor said, and I agree with him. And these problems, sometimes even worse than the Israeli occupation. In Darfur, 200,000 people are killed in a matter of 2 years. That is a problem. So we need to look at the big picture. Regarding the United States, yes, takes double standards. But you know what? The Arab governments do the same. They even take harsher double standards than the U.S. has contributed positively and negatively. But the U.S. gave Egypt $25 billion in the past 20 years, and gave Jordan I don't know how many billions, and gave the Palestinians billions, and helped liberate the Kuwaitis, and helped the Iraqi people, and helped the Moroccan people, and so on. So it is some bad and good in it. So we have to learn not to take one stand. We have to be pragmatic. We really have, as people, and you are representative of these people, take our own destiny in our hand. I think it's time that we not let the United States or those dictators dictate our life. I think if we stand proud and take our godly given right. I want to tell you this story. I don't want to take long. In the Quran, God told the angels that they should bow down for Adam. And these are the angels. And they said to him, listen, this is a man. This is going to spill blood and destroy the earth. What about us? We worship you all the time. You should pick us to rule the earth. And he said, no, you don't know. Also the story when he asked Satan to do the same, and Satan said, no, I'm not going to do it. God gave Satan the right to object. He gave him that freedom. That is a godly given freedom. So we have to take our freedom in our own hand and stand proud and with peace and say, we want elections, we want to own back our countries. And regardless of what the United States does, we should stop blaming the US. We should start thinking how to empower ourselves.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Yasmina. I'm from Jordan. I personally don't believe that it's possible or that some of the countries in the Middle East are ready for a sudden transition from dictatorship or being in monarchies into total democracy. I don't think that's realistic, and I think it's going to take a lot of time. But my question is, what are some of the strategies that we should use to accomplish that or to reach it?
It's a very good question. That's true. While it's easy to provide and adopt laws or procedures to enhance democracy or provide for full participation of women, but the true objective will be accomplished only if we truly invest in education and empower people. So the true road to building a civil society in any country, including Islamic countries, is to provide for good, decent education and invest in the new generation, people like you, and give them an opportunity. And this is going to be a process that will require time. But we should not use the excuses of having a different culture or being a different society in order to prevent that process to start. As I mentioned, liberty is God-given right, and it's something that every human being deserves and demands. The way to do it is truly to provide for decent education on the long run in these countries and to build the civil society to further enable the people.
I do believe this is at the core of what needs to be addressed, this question. I congratulate you for it. There is no rational way that could move the people of the Arab Islamic world from dictatorship to democracy overnight. It's just foolishness. It will destabilize each and every country, and you will end up with more chaos. We've had a similar experience 30, 40 years ago where there was an age of revolutions in Syria, in Egypt, in Libya, etc., etc. I hate to tell you what the outcome of all these revolutions is because it's very well known to you. I think there has to be a much more structured program of change. And it has to involve the cooperation of these very governments that everybody objects to. Now, let us get serious. These governments are not going to be thrown out. They are going to have to be part of a change process. And this will include nudging from the outside and nudging from the inside. This is where the role of the international community has to be to demand more accountability of this government as it gives it aid, etc., and to insist on certain rules of the game, internationally accepted for the treatment of peoples, whatever the religion or background is, to insist on it as the rest of the world deals with these countries. And it also has to help resolve the long-standing conflicts, including Palestine, etc. Now, on the inside, there is an obligation on the people themselves. You know, their rights will not be given to them. This business of actually trying to form parties, it's not going to be well received, but it's going to have to be a challenge for the people. 10 people, 15 people get together, we want to have a party for, say, a secular democracy. Another people will say, well, we want to have a party to defend, you know, our city in whatever. Whatever puts them together there, to use the right of free association to push for public political participation. There is no way that the people are going to be given this right if they don't ask for it, and if they ask for it, it's going to be hard. And you know, we've seen examples in some countries about this. And also, people have to ask for more economic freedom, more economic equality. This is not quite often mentioned. The people of the top 5%, whether in government or in business or in media or in the military, pretty much hog the power and the money. And there is no middle class. Every effort has to be made to establish a wide middle class. The reason Europe and the United States are stable is because they have wide middle class that's essentially satisfied. This should be the objective, and the effort has to be from within and without.
Okay. I want to remind you that you are watching Close Up on C-SPAN, a special edition coming to you from the National Archives. Today we're talking with a special group of students who are here on an international exchange program. They represent countries with significant Muslim populations. They're here under the auspices of the United States Department of State. We're talking about democracy in the Muslim world, and our guests are Said Jawad, who is Afghanistan's ambassador to the United States. Also Ziad Asali, who is president and founder, I got it right that time, of the American Task Force on Palestine, and Ali Al-Ahmed, who is director of the Institute for Gulf Affairs. We're going to return to our questions in just a moment, but before we do that, I want to introduce you to a special guest. Joining us is the archivist here, of the United States. In February of 2005, historian Alan Weinstein was confirmed by the U.S. Senate and began his service as the 9th archivist of these United States, leading the National Archives and Records Administration. There are hosts in this wonderful facility, and Dr. Weinstein, thank you for joining us.
My
Thanks
pleasure.
for hosting this here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we want to give our viewers and our students a chance to hear from you directly about the National Archives.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the Close-Up Foundation. Your work is extraordinary, and this is an extraordinary group. It's my guess that most of you are not from the United States, but from other countries, and you're most welcome, and we're delighted to have you here. As has already been said, I've been National Archivist only for 16 months. I was once introduced as the National Alchemist of the United States, but that doesn't happen to be the case. We are more than one building. People come to this building, and we'd love to have you here. We had 1 million visitors here last year, but we also have at least 35 other facilities scattered throughout the United States. And I won't bore you with all the details except to say that we take care of what are at least 1 billion documents in this building, 1 billion. I've counted them all, so I know they're all there. And they're about thank you, they're about 9 billion documents system-wide. Now, the topic you're dealing with today is dear to my heart. And I will watch it, obviously, on C-SPAN. God bless C-SPAN once again. Before taking this job, I ran an organization called the Center for Democracy, which worked with new democracies throughout the world. And already since becoming archivist, we have expanded our international programs. This, I'm not sure which camera I'm supposed to...
You know, let me hold that for you. I'll show it to the camera, and then you can
We
talk
had as
about
our
it.
special guests 10 ambassadors from Middle Eastern and North African countries discussing things with State Department officials here just very recently. We're going to expand programs of that kind. Most importantly, we welcome Close-Up here because Close-Up does such an extraordinary job in raising the level of dialogue that we're so important, that is so important to us. One of the 5 or 6 goals of the National Archives, I'll just read the thing from our new strategic plan, is to increase civic literacy in America through our museum, public outreach, grants, and education programs. Your presence here increases civic literacy in this country, and so we thank you for that. I won't take up any more of your time. The discussion is too important.
Thank you very
all.
much. Appreciate it. Pleasure, sir. Thank you much.
Thank you. Come back anytime.
Thank you very much.
That goes for you too, C-SPAN.
Nice place. We'll be back. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to, what I want to let you know now is we have less than a half an hour and 6 countries to get to. So what I'm going to ask those of you at the microphones to do, if you would be kind enough to direct your question to 1 or 2 of our panelists so we don't get into the rhythm of 3 answers to every question. I know that doesn't mean we'll exclude you from weighing in, but if you direct, we'll give that person the most of the response time. And you're next, sir. Go ahead, please.
My question cannot be directed because it's for everyone in here.
Everyone in the room?
Mainly, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your help.
My name is Sari. I'm Arab Israeli. Israel is a democratic country, and we are a part of a major minority in Israel. However, we are not treated equally comparing to the Jewish citizens in the country. For example, in economy, in education, and in politics, we have 10 representatives out of 120 representatives in the government. In the other side, we're not treated equally by the other Arab nations. They call us names, such as traitor, such as Arab 48. This name doesn't fit us, and sometimes they're offensive to us. We don't know why we are treated like this, and we don't know where do we belong. We believe that we belong to both nations, but both nations don't believe that we belong to them. To make it clear, we are 100% proud of our Palestinian roots. We keep our Palestinian culture alive and our spirit up. We keep struggling and fighting for rights for our Palestinian brothers in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And we keep fighting for peace and equality in Israel and Palestine, but no one fights back to us. No one does anything back to us. We feel we are squeezed between 2 nations that keep pulling us in and pulling us out. Is this democracy? Is this equal? Do we feel that we have a country? We don't even have somebody to represent us in the world. I think we're the first people who represent the Arab Israeli in the world. And another point.
You know what, I'm going to ask you if you would make your point briefly so we can get to the response.
My last point is, we use, people got angry because we say Israel and we use Hebrew words. This is 58 years of occupation and control. We are completely influenced by the Jewish people. And names, words, and cultures don't take Palestine from our blood. Palestine is inside us, not in our names.
Okay, let's see if we
Thank you.
get a reaction to Dr. Asali. sounds like a question for you. Okay. I'm no expert, but I think there's some support for your position.
You clearly have some support here. You know, some people seem to appreciate your predicament and understand what you're about. Let me take what I like to think is a thoughtful view of this, because you know, things will not be resolved by rhetoric. You have been under occupation, if you want, or a deformation of your identity for over half a century, and you have an existential struggle. You are Palestinians, but you are also Israelis. I'd rather, if I'm to advise you, presume to give an advice for people who have, you know, do not need any advice. I think your number one struggle now should be a civil rights struggle, in order to assert your existence as first-class citizens and not second-class citizens in your own country. And you will have a support in that fight amongst people in your country. This is a winnable struggle if done properly. We live in a country here which has survived a long, protracted period of oppression of a certain minority, and eventually you yourself witness the improvement in that struggle. In that fight, and when you win it, first off, you cannot blame anybody that you have only 10 members of the Knesset, because you have 20% of the population, and you are all allowed to participate. You should have more members of the Knesset. That's your challenge. Secondly, in your fight for equality, no one globally can be opposed to what you do. Thirdly, in your support for the Palestinians in their aspirations for statehood and independence, you will be in a much better position to serve if you are powerful and able to participate in your system.
Yeah, I just want to weigh in. Actually, when in college, in my political science degree, I did a paper comparing the Shia of Saudi Arabia minority to the Arabs of Israel. And you know, you have 10 members in the parliament, Shia have 5. And they are 20%. So I'm trying to say here is you actually have it better than minorities in the Arab world. And this is not to say minimizing the struggle of the Arab Israelis. I'm not saying that. But I'm telling you that, look, you are ahead of many minorities in the region who, in Bahrain, they are a majority Shia, but they don't have the same rights as they are second-class citizens. Similarly, with the Copts in Egypt, they are also 17 million of them. Here, you can use the Israeli system. Like I agree with Dr. Ziad, is push for your rights through that. And it is a shame that you are an Arab and us Arabs look down on you. You are an Arab and we should be supporting your community and supporting them. And unfortunately, your community could have been the key to solving this issue, the Arab-Israeli conflict. That community is proud, and I know some of them. So I applaud you for coming and speaking your mind. And everyone should look up to that community for solving. They are the key to solving the Israeli-Arab conflict, I think.
Far from looking down on you, there is a great deal of admiration for you as people who have stuck it out and been steadfast and have actually asserted yourself. You produce great poets also, by the way.
Yes. Emil Habib. Thanks.
Hi, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Hello, I'm Musal. I'm from Morocco. And, well, I wanted to ask a question about the Middle East, but, like, there is a lot of representatives from there. So I will go to a more personal question about, like, what's going on in the Western Sahara in Morocco. You know how when we came here and we're, like, presenting our country to people, in all of the American maps, Morocco is divided into parts. There is Morocco and Western Sahara. We truly believe that the Sahara is a part of Morocco. I know we have some kind of violence down there, but I don't really understand, like, what the U.S. side is and, like, what you believe, you know.
Yeah, I can start that. This is a problem. It's an international issue. The maps here in this country are based on United Nations recognition of these countries, and we have this problem in the region that If you don't recognize the Western Sahara, you put it part of Morocco. But if you abide by the 8 nations regulations to say that Western Sahara is still not decided part of Morocco or not. This is the legacy of the colonialist Spanish or the English and others who we are still struggling and fighting among each other over land and over space. And we have paid huge price for this. I think in America they are open to a peaceful resolution. That's why James Baker was the guy who was trying to resolve this issue. And unfortunately, this is not the only problem in Morocco. And you know, I just read today that 2.4 million Moroccans live in Europe because Morocco has 40% literacy rate and similar to Egypt. So these are other problems besides the Western Sahara. There is the problem of education, literacy, and poverty that we have to work on too in those countries. And we need to work with each other, not fight with each other. We have to speak to each other, even if we have extreme disagreement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Amr Jayus and I'm from Palestine. My question is pretty much directed to our guest, Mr. Ali Ahmed. I just want to say that America claims that it's a big supporter to democracy throughout the world. Well, I see a contradiction in that. After the new elections in Gaza and the West Bank, which is Palestine, the Palestinians have elected Hamas as their new government on their own free will. And as a reaction to that, America cut all the foreign aid to us Palestinians. Because of that, 165,000 workers in Palestine are not being paid and starving right now because they're not being paid because America cut the foreign aid. Is that a support to democracy? Thank you.
Yeah.
I really hate to be the guy that rains on parades, but applause takes time, and we really want to get to your questions.
Yes, I think I agree with you partially that the U.S. did not accept the Palestinian people's choice to elect Hamas, but you know there is also a responsibility on the other side. Like I said, I think we have to, especially in our region, to stop blaming the others. Can we talk about what we did wrong? In the Quran, in the Islam, you are asked to do, in the Quran, it says, مَا عَلَيْكُمْ لَا أَنفُسَكُمْ. You are only obligated to what you do. I'm not interested in making the U.S., I'm an Arab, I'm a Muslim, I'm not interested in reforming the United States. My responsibility is to me, to my people. I want to reform my brother. They say that when you are young, you want to reform the world. When you are in your 30s, you want to reform your country. And when you are 40, you want to reform your city. When you're 50, you want to reform your wife. And when you're 60, you're thinking about reforming yourself. Let's start from reforming ourselves. And they have their own interest. The US and the Europeans, the Western, they have an interest in their own interest. Can we think about our interest? Can we stop, like for example, you say Hamas. Hamas is the government. Hamas has done wrong to the Iraqi people when they praised Zarqawi and called him a martyr, for example. Can we take responsibility for that? I think we have to be more responsible. Like Dr. Ziad said, it's not only about elections. It has to be with our civility. We have to be more civilized. We have to use our intellectual, our powerful culture. We don't have to use guns and bombs. I think this is the way out for the people. You're talking about starving. I think there is a bit of exaggeration there. There is exaggeration, I'm sorry. Because I see Hamas working on building a satellite station in Dubai with 300...
Excuse me, Mr. Ali. Excuse me.
With 300 employees.
Wait, let him finish. I'll give you a chance to respond.
With 300 employees. You know, there are starving Egyptians too, starving Sudanese and starving Somalis. So we have to look at everybody. Palestinians are equal to everybody. They don't have higher status than the Somalis or the Sudanese or the Saudis. That's why we have to address the issue from the big picture. And I want the people of Palestine to have food and to have money, but they have also to take responsibility for their actions too.
Okay, quick response. Please hold the applause.
Just to say, Israel have killed 4,500 Palestinians, and the Palestinians on the other side have killed only 1,000. On the America's media, 13% of our deaths are being showed. On the other hand, 150% of the Israeli deaths have been showed on TV.
That's true. I agree with you. That's one of my papers.
Is that? I mean, you're saying we don't have to use the bombs and the violence. Are we using the violence or them? They've killed more than 6 times more than us, and you're saying we don't have to use the bombs.
Both sides. Both sides have to stop. Again, both sides have to stop.
We appreciate your
Both
strong,
sides.
appreciate you have strong
Thank
feelings
you.
on these issues, but we really need the time
Both
that you're
sides.
wasting when you applaud. Dr. Asali.
If I may just take a lead on this Palestine issue, I have been at this for some time, and I do, more than anything else, appreciate the passion involved on everybody's side about this issue, that it really stifles serious debate. At the one hand, as a Palestinian American myself, who is concerned about both countries and the future of all people, I want to see that we define an objective, an achievable objective for the Palestinians. It seems to me that if the Palestinians want to have a state of their own, independent, free, viable, they have already achieved a major breakthrough with the international community by just accepting this principle of a state of Palestine roughly on the border of 1967, West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. This is a major gain for the Palestinians, a major gain. They are not just a refugee problem. It is a state yet to exist, but it exists in the international agreements and in the minds of people everywhere, including the majority of the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Americans, etc., etc. This is not something that the Palestinians should yield quickly. If they obfuscate, if they make their own objectives vague and nebulous, and let's not really talk about, Haifa and Jaffa, let's talk about Hudna, let's talk about this and that, and not accept the achievable, continue to defend this concept of trying to achieve a Palestinian state. It's a struggle. It's a major struggle to get that. If the Palestinians themselves get confused into what it is that they want, how can they get it from the rest of the world? And if they do not get it from the rest of the world, how are they going to get it?
Thanks. Hi.
Hi, I'm Suleiman Yahya from Sultanate of Oman. We all know in the medieval ages, centuries ago, that the government was under the church, and we all know that that didn't go so far and it caused wars. If currently Islam was under the government or government was under Islam, there's going to be wars between Shias and Sunnis. My question is, why doesn't the Muslim leaders take their own opinions in making the perfect democracy based on the people and what they want?
So are you describing sort of the Middle East version of separation of church and state?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Everybody, especially this Islamist movement or religious movement, they say that Islam is the solution. You know what? Muslims are the solutions. When you say we have to have a constitution that has Quran inside of it, I say no. Muslims, I trust the people. You're Muslims. You're not going to vote on something that violates your Muslim tenets. You are going to write the law. God gave you this. It's in the Quran. It's a God given this trust of the world to the human. Okay, he didn't say to the cleric. He said to the human, to the individual human. So if we should take that responsibility. Religion is a private matter. It can involve, the problem in our region is the state has been controlling Islam. And that's why Islam has been deviated and misused by the religion. Islam should be the people's choice. It should, you could be religious and run for office, but do not dictate to others. Because Oman is a great example of how religion and state can work, because it is a country where you have Shia and Sunni and you have Abadi, which is a third sect in Islam, and they live in religious harmony because the relationship are working very good because the way the structures are. That's why we should not ask for an Islamic government. We should ask for a Muslim government, if in Muslim countries, obviously. So you will write the laws that you think are appropriate for you. Not what the cleric and who wants to oppress those who disagree with him religiously.
Mr. Ambassador, you've been in your post now, 3 years? Yes. Is that correct? Describe to us what you've learned about how Americans view this question of the role of religion in government and how it is in Afghanistan or in the larger region.
The Afghan constitution provides for freedom of worship. And we are an Islamic country, we are a Muslim country, so most of the laws in Afghanistan are based on Islam. But at the same time, this does not mean that the principles of freedom or respect for human rights are not implemented. The issue, the problem is that there's a lot of generalization about Islamic societies, and like in here, most of the discussion right now turning into the Middle East, and it's very clear that all Muslims are not Arab and all Arabs are not Muslim. So the problem, the issues that we are facing, it's very different in our societies, in our country. And in case of Afghanistan, the constitution that was adopted is one of the most enlightened constitutions without antagonizing any of the Islamic, fundamental Islamic belief of the Afghan people. And I think while we are facing the threat of terrorism and extremism, it's important for the Muslim moderate to first have a voice, but also to be respectful of the belief and of the fundamental issues, the fundamental teaching of Islam, so that they will not provide an opportunity to the extremists and the terrorists and others to kind of carry the banner of a religion which teaches peace and an understanding and cooperation between different countries.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Sadia Amir and I'm from Pakistan. And my question is that what do you think the US government should be doing about the Kashmir issue, and what is the opinion of the rest of the world about it? I mean, the way Kashmir is stuck up between India and Pakistan, so.
Do you have an opinion on your question before we get, do you have what you'd like to see the United States do?
I think that Kashmir should be given its independence, but I cannot say more and I need more opinions of.
Okay, fair enough. Any thoughts?
I think, for 50 years we tried this road. When you go to a doctor and he gives you a medicine, and Dr. Asali is a doctor, and if you give you a medicine and it doesn't work for 5 months or 6 months, you go look for another doctor or another medicine. I think we shouldn't use violence, really, because it has only killed and made the problem worse. I think that it's time. What's wrong if Kashmir was part of India? It's a democracy. Let live within India. What's the problem? And there are also Kashmiris who want to be part of India. I really think it's time for us to move ahead instead of saying, we want to be part of this country or that country. India is a democracy. We can learn. We can be a Muslim and live in India. The president of India is a Muslim. That doesn't happen in Muslim countries. So I think, my personal opinion, Kashmir should continue to be part of India and just live and build something for the future. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Okay. Can I just, I'll try to address this generically.
I'm sorry, we're getting a lot of...
This is a realistic solution.
Yes, please.
We need to be quiet.
Also on the question of the Western Sahara and all these things. What we have witnessed in the 20th century is actually the unfolding of the Eastern question and the Asiatic and African land, whereby whatever happened to these countries after the absence of the Ottoman Empire in general in this part of the world. It took 200 years for the Ottoman Empire to die in Europe, and many, many wars were fought till the borders were decided. Now we do not have very stable borders anywhere, from Asia to Morocco, and a lot of energy and time and wars have been fought over borders. I just want to say this. Look at Israel, a tiny little country that was able to build a lot in a small area of land. I think if less energies are spent on border struggles and fights and more on internal building and structuring, these issues become less significant. Specifically on Kashmir, there is no military solution for Kashmir. There is none. Now we have 2 nuclear powers at each end of Kashmir, and the confrontation would be just cataclysmic. So there has to be negotiations, and here's where the international diplomacy, especially the United States, has to be a very active ingredient to bring out a solution that's compatible with the interests of both and with the electoral wishes of the Kashmiri people.
But I want to say one thing, is if we do this everywhere, let's say, do you accept that the Kuwait city will want to separate from Kuwait, or Muscat want to separate from Muscat? If you open this gate, it's not going to have a problem. If you want Gaza to separate to be its own state because the people of Gaza don't want to be associated with the West Bank, I think it's not the only way for us to, it's not the only way is not to go independent and create your country. There are other ways. Participate in your community and build. There is other way of building dreams and achieving success is not only by separating. Otherwise, there are so many other people besides Kashmiris who want to separate their own countries too. The Copts want to separate state in Egypt, and the Darfurians want to separate state in Sudan, and so on. So, and the Berber wants separate state in Morocco, and it's not going to end. And if you support the Kashmiri situation, why don't you support the Berber and the Arabs and the Shia and the Kurds and everyone else?
You know, I'm going to suggest the response that I'm hearing. People watching at home don't hear you because you're not on a microphone. All it ends up being is rude to our guests who are trying to talk in the room, or to your colleagues who are trying to listen. So might I suggest that just save your comments till after we finish taping, and you could come up and speak in a more informal way, because that will be, you'll find that more productive and perhaps more satisfying. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Hey, I'm Kapil from Kuwait, and I just want to make a comment on like having separating democracy and a country's faith. I believe there shouldn't be a separation, because the country's faith should stay as an influence, allowing the freedom of choice to each person, but it should stay as an influence. For example, if you look at America, we see that the youth there's a big drift from morality to immorality. It happened after the Bible was taken out. In the same way, I believe that every country should stand strong on their faith and influence, however, not forcing their faith on other person and giving them the freedom of choice. And I believe that if they don't stand on their faith, there's going to be a big consequence. Like we see the kids nowadays, and the youth is messed up, you know.
Wait, adults are supposed to say that about you. You're not supposed to say that about other kids. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your statement. Reaction?
Well, we should separate actually the moral issues from the formation of a political system in a country. We do face actually a moral problem in countries such as former Soviet Union, where there was no democracy. It is true that in more traditional society, until the rule of law is strengthened, it's important to keep the traditional values in order to keep the society cohesive. But at the same time, the identification of a political system or democracy or freedom with moral decays, which is a separate issue, and it's happening in societies that did not have a tradition or a history of democracy, such as I mentioned, a number of countries and the former Soviet Union. So we have to separate these two issues completely. This is what democracy means is to give the people a choice to participate in the political system of their own choice in the country, and to empower the formation of a civil society, and to prevent the political regimes of using excuses such as moral decay to prevent ordinary citizens to have access to their basic rights. We should separate these two issues completely.
Yeah, I just say something about the question is raised quite often whether Islam is compatible with democracy. To set Islam apart. Islam is just a religion. Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism are just religions. In the name of Islam, great civilizations have arisen in the past. Great civilizations with major contributions to world levels of achievement across the board. And many forms of government have been formed under Islam. Now there is an attempt, recently, within the last few decades, to define Islam in a certain specific way, a restrictive, and to the others seems like it is xenophobic and exclusive. Now, this attempt should be resisted completely. Islam is a very wide thing. It can be compatible with any kind of a system of governance if it is allowed to develop, if it is allowed to be debated, if it's allowed to be challenged and then produce results. No more than any other religion. I think it is almost racist to ask the question in such a stark terms whether it is, Islam per se is compatible with democracy.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question. Go ahead, please.
We know today that the United States sees Hezbollah a weapon and Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. So what do you think the Lebanese government should take as steps to solve this issue?
I can speak on that. I think Hezbollah stood one time and defended. Okay.
I'm sorry, we have about 30 seconds.
Okay, so I was just saying that it's a Lebanese issue, and the Lebanese should work with themselves to solve this issue and use, and through the political system, the international world community can help the Lebanese, but should not dictate for them.
Any other quick thought? We have about 10 seconds for each of you.
It is an internal Lebanese problem, and you know, it is hard to see the country existing together with separate militia, not under the control of the national government.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I wish we had more time. Obviously, there's more enthusiasm for that discussion. Thank you. Before we say goodbye completely, there are a number of thanks that I need to share with you. One is we want to thank our friends at the Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, particularly